quickly. I spotted a big warehouse, size of a football pitch almost. Wasn't ideal because it was too big, if it can be too big. But still decided to move in. So we moved in, and we wouldn't be... I don't think we'd still be here, Stephen, if we hadn't had the help from a lot of people, a lot of support with food. All the big chains send us food down to the centre. People turned up at the front door. Somebody turned up on Christmas Eve. I've never seen him before. I'll probably never see him again. Wrote me out a cheque for £5,000. You know, it's not every day in the week someone comes along with £5,000 and just gives you it and said, there, that'll help you to look after some of the people here. So, great deal of support in the area and surrounding support, other parts of the country. The football community's been all right. Manchester United come down a week before Christmas and helped with a Christmas dinner a week before Christmas, which they all accepted and loved it. So we've had plenty of support, and without that support, what I wanted to do wouldn't have been achieved, because it takes the finances, and it also takes people wanting to help you.
Power. It's true we have
tough character to take on, but
what De Niro must have felt like when he went and played Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull. You know, this is not a nice person, you know, that he was playing. It's challenging and it's hard every day to do that.
While Dorff has dabbled in MMA, his training was to make the scenes as realistic as possible.
I gotta say, I mean, I've never been involved in a choreography situation where the fighting was really what the script was. You know, it wasn't about how do we make this round exciting and he gets one in and I get one in. It was much more storytelling throughout the fighting, which I thought was very unique.
Ashley Dvorkin, Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. Stay on top of the latest news and information from Fox News. Listen and download the Fox News Hourly Update on your time. The trending stories you need anytime you want it. Listen and download now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. From the Fox News Podcasts Network. Subscribe and listen to the Trey Gowdy Podcast.
It skews our thinking when all we see on television or read online or in papers or experience on social media is negative. It skews the proportions. When it is all you see, you tend to think it is all that exists, and we have to be more disciplined. It's not only not all that exists, it's not even the majority of what exists.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. The Fox News Rundown is a weekday morning podcast that dives deep into the major and controversial stories of the day. Hosted by the anchors of Fox News Radio. Subscribe now to hear a perspective of news you won't find anywhere else. Listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
I'm Ashley Dvorkin with a Fox Celebrity Profile with Gerard Butler and Marina Baccarin of the new action-packed disaster movie Greenland. The two play an estranged couple who, along with their son, race to escape a planet-killing comet. Butler spoke about playing a regular guy in this scenario versus, say, a Secret Service agent with trained skills.
It's more, I think, affecting when you can play a character that's much more relatable to an audience, but also relatable to you.
Baccarin says this relatability ups the what would you do factor.
For the most part, the scenes are very grounded in our kid and what are we doing? What steps are we taking for ourselves?
And both discussed aspects of the film which resonate even more now for them compared to when they made it.
Somewhat of a cathartic experience to watch the film because, you know, you go through this grueling journey, but you do come out of it and there is a sense of hope and there's a sense of community.
Back to the beginning of the pandemic when we didn't know how it was going to play out. Those almost unimaginable, incredibly overpowering feelings and sensations is what is going on, I think, a lot in our movie.
Ashley Dvorkin, Fox News.
Now, from the historical audio archives of Fox News Talk.
President Franklin D. Roosevelt asked Congress to declare war on Japan the day after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The date, December 8th, 1941.
Hostilities exist. There is no blinking at the fact that our people, our territory, and our interests are in grave danger. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Stay tuned to hear more history as it unfolds before your ears. It's the audio archives of Fox News Talk.
It is the Guy Benson Show. Great to be with you this afternoon, and we're covering the White House press briefing for you, by the way. Coming up in a few minutes, we're going to turn to Seattle, because once again, craziness is ensuing. Portland, Seattle, Antifa, they're back. And so we're going to talk to Jason Rantz, host of the Jason Rantz Show on KTTH 770. In Seattle and Tacoma. We'll chat with him in a few minutes here on the Guy Benson Show. But, look, just an observation. I mean, again, this is why, and it was a fun chat with Richard Fowler, but I think this is why for a lot of us who are conservatives, we look at the calls of unity and they just ring hollow for us, because it seems like it's, at this point, about punishment. But Griff Jenkins and I talked a little bit about the memes, the Bernie memes, and I was super disappointed, as I'm sure you were, that you can't buy the Bernie Sanders mittens. And I know for a fact that you were thinking about buying the Bernie Sanders mittens, because why wouldn't you buy the Bernie Sanders mittens? I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous. They're beautiful. And everybody's wondering where Bernie got those mittens. If you look at the memes that are going around, and there's Bernie sitting there, and he's shivering, and he's covered up, and he's got a big coat on, and he's got these big mittens, and you're looking at him, and you're going, man, those are the mittens I've always dreamed of. Now, can I bring producer Christine? Can I ask her to jump in on this? Because my question for her is, earlier we were doing a little show prep, and you told me you're a mittens person. Is that right?
No. I said I think they're adorable. It's not that I walk out every day with mittens on, but I think it's a really cute look for Bernie. I don't know. I have a little soft spot for him. I don't like anything he does, says political.
My favorite was seeing Bernie with the Golden Girls on the couch.
So, Rich, that's also my soft spot there. Golden Girls is my all-time favorite show. I mean, I've been a Golden Girls fan since I was a little girl. This isn't just something that just happened over the past few years. So once I saw Bernie sitting on the Golden Girls couch, the meme, I mean, it was all over for me. I loved it. And I think we needed a little humor, with that yesterday. I think we could all agree, right or left, that was pretty funny, and it was a nice chuckle last night.
Well, I tried to buy you a pair of the Bernie mittens just to say thanks for, letting me fill in for Guy, but I can't buy them. They can't get them. They're not for sale.
Well, you could knit them. I mean, if you truly are committed to thanking producer Christine, take the weekend, find the pattern, get the yarn, and knit me a pair and mail them to me.
Find the weekend? What do you think I've been doing during these breaks?
Well done, Rich.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Well, we'll do our best to get producer Christine a pair of mittens. The mittens that we as a nation deserve right now. Coming up here on the Guy Benson Show, we'll talk about the chaos. The left is at it again. Why, though? They're in charge now. Straight ahead.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that very, very few people get.
I'm Colin Flynn, meeting some of the internet's biggest and first viral video stars.
I now was this girl with this extreme amount of baggage latched on.
The story is about human generosity. It's about kindness at the end of the day. I'm really, really lucky to have spoken to you tonight, Lou. And
appreciate it,
thanks
Stephen.
Tonight, sir. Thank you.
Fox News.
That occurred really in 2017. I was called by a man I did not know on a Saturday morning at 8:30, a gruff-sounding older guy, even gruffer sounding than I am, but not quite as old, who simply said his name was Joe. He was an investigator. Would I speak to him about the Billy Meyer case? I said I would, and then he said one more time, are you sure? Because I think this is a hoax. I said, well, let's talk about it. 3 months. We went back and forth. He called, like clockwork Saturday mornings. He disappeared at the end of March. He reappears in August of 2017 and says, I'm going to tell you who I am, and then I'm going to tell you about your Billy Meyer case. I said, okay, well, who the heck are you, Joe? He says, all right, I am the former top investigator and supervisor for the United States Air Force.
We're in We need you to do these things. The former White House coronavirus coordinator on CBS's Face the Nation. Dr. Birx saying she knew it was a pandemic when hospitals in China were overrun, adding at the start we needed testing for people arriving in the U.S., not just looking at symptoms of illness. America's listening to Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. Download and listen to Tyrus and Tim.
Ladies, this is why you must not laugh at men's jokes.
Yes,
And try and make them think if you're as a way of flirting, because then they will run around thinking they're funny.
Yep.
Like Cam is not funny at all. And I told him that. He's like, oh, other girls laugh at my jokes. I'm like, that's because they were trying to sleep with you.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
The Dean's List with Janice Dean.
Justin Timberlake makes the Dean's List for helping buy a custom-made van for a family in Tennessee. The Stitt family was raising money to buy a wheelchair-accessible vehicle for their 17-year-old son, Jake, who has cerebral palsy. Having grown up in Tennessee, Justin Timberlake heard about the crowdfunding campaign and without hesitation decided he wanted to pay for the custom-built van and arranged to have it delivered to the family. Mr. Timberlake arranged the Zoom call with Jake where he told him the news. The entire family, including Jake, were thrilled. While the Stitt family had already raised quite a bit of money toward the purchase of the van, Mr. Timberlake's gift made it possible for that money to be used for Jake's future care and other expenses. Jake's dad says he is so thankful for the generosity and says it brings them peace not having to have extra worries right now. Well done, Justin Timberlake. You're just as awesome as we always thought you were. You made the Dean's List. Janice Dean, Fox News.
This is Fox News Talk.
Headline Rewind.
1970.
The student now goes to college to proclaim rather than to learn. The lessons of the past are ignored and obliterated in a contemporary antagonism known as the generation gap.
You just go through a phase of wanting to be up there, in the limelight. Well, I'm going through a phase now where I don't want to be in the limelight.
Ali comes out to meet Frazier, but Frazier starts to retreat. If Frazier goes back an inch farther, he'll wind up in a ringside seat. Ali swings to the left, Ali swings to the right. Look at the kids carry the fight.
Everybody just gathered around, organized, and it was orderly. No kids were out of hand. They just wanted to talk. 2 seconds, throwing tear gas, and the kids were picking up and throwing them back at the cops. And they chased the kids over the hill. The cops were boxed in. There was kids all around them. And all of a sudden, cops got trigger happy and shot kids.
News as it happened, news as it happens.
This is Fox News Talk.
This is House Call for Health. Cases of domestic violence are spiking during the pandemic as many people stay home. Emily Whitehurst, the Houston Area Women's Center CEO, sees big increases in emergency placement for those fleeing abuse.
What we're seeing is alarming. We will be there for them, and this community will be there for them, and that's important. It's important to me that I can say, and that the advocates who are picking up the phone calls can say, we can help you navigate a safe departure, and we're going to be there with you every step of the way.
Jamie Wright is a domestic violence survivor.
One thing I would want anybody that's listening to know is that they're not alone. Using all the resources that I could at the shelter, saving my money, getting my mental health where it needed to be and where it should have been and where I deserved it to be. I absolutely love my life now.
House Call for Health. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News.
The Guy Benson Show.
It is the Guy Benson Show, and Rich Zeoli from WPHT in Philadelphia with you this afternoon. Appreciate you being here. The question I have is, now that the Democrats are back in charge, why are there riots going on once again in downtown Seattle, and protests and property damage and Antifa? Why are they out? I thought that everything was going to be back to normal now that Democrats are back in charge and President Trump left the White House. What are they doing? Here to discuss with us, Jason Rantz is host of the Jason Rantz Show, which you can hear on KTTH 770 AM and 94.5 FM in Seattle, Tacoma. Hey, Jason, thanks for joining us here on the Guy Benson Show. My name's Rich. How you doing?
I'm doing
up there on the West Coast, because
Редька? Нет, я везу не редьку. Я везу вакцину от ковид.
By right-wingers for some unknown reason, and all of this is just peaceful block parties. It's just an extension of the summer of love that we enjoyed for several months over the 2020 year. I mean, look, everyone knew this was going to happen. We knew because Antifa, particularly in the Pacific Northwest, they don't hide their plan. They're very open with their organizing. They're not on Parler, by the way. They're on Facebook and they're on Twitter, and they pass around this information. And just looking at some of the flyers that were distributed over the course of the last couple weeks, they're literally showing images of burning cars. I mean, they're pretty open about their intent. What we saw last year was condemn any of the violence. They did that for a number of reasons. The biggest one having to do with they just thought the violence, the riots were actually politically expedient for them, that they'd be able to use it to defeat Donald Trump, and they very clearly did that. Now, what they've ended up doing is creating this monster that's not going to stop, because instead of being punished for all of the crimes that they committed, they were rewarded. Here in Seattle, we ended up defunding the police up to 20% with promises of defunding it by 50% this year and into next year. So all of their demands are being met, and they're being met because of the violence. So you've just taught these children that if you continue to engage in that kind of quote-unquote activism, well, guess what? You get rewarded.
Jason, I think that is absolutely correct. I mean, they believe now that they can win this way, and it's the same way. I mean, I've got a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 9-month-old. And when my children have temper tantrums, I make it very, very clear to them, and win by having temper tantrums, they're going to have more temper tantrums. Why can't we deal with adults in that same mindset?
Because for the most part, we're talking about people who vote for the Democrats, at least in the Pacific Northwest. I know they're no fan of...
Ревность или требование повышать и повышать гонорары стали причиной его смерти. Он очаровал аудиторию сладким соном, а мы... Видит его совсем иначе.
Андрей Александрович, а почему сложилась такая ситуация и когда она начала складываться?
Shortly after those photographs from India, he found out in '69, and he wrote to Meyer, and here's the kicker. The extraterrestrial woman, alleged, named Asket, and Billy Meyer, picked Wendell Stevens up in America. And because they knew that there would be, in 1981, this top-secret test flight, they took him forward in time, put him down on the ground, proceeded to go up in the air, and then as soon as they were recognized on radar, the stealth came and made its passes. Wendell Stevens took some photographs. They took him back to '69. He kept the photographs, kept them, and put them in his archive. And I don't know how they survived all of the, the picking through that has been done by people since his death and all. They missed him, and there they are.
And of course, they survived the time travel.
They survived, probably easily, because that alleged time travel, look, that's a lot to ask of people, and I don't have to ask anybody to believe it. I'm just saying, here's the story. All we know, we've got photographs, 5 photographs of the UFO interacting with a stealth fighter, presumably at Groom Lake. What are you going to do?
So what do you think a ballet like that, if you can call it like that, a performance like that, was for?
Well, I think that it was to give for the future. And all. So it wasn't until Wendell Stevens passed away that these were, just accidentally found. So here's the deal on it as far as I'm concerned. The unasked question in all of ufology is, if the contacts are real.
It seems very clear, at least on this issue, because I don't give Republicans a pass on inconsistency. I think politicians across the board have a tendency to be inconsistent. But not on this, not with the Republicans. Republicans overwhelmingly and consistently said political violence is wrong. We called it all out for 6 months last year, and immediately after the riot on January 6th, every Republican called it out. The only outlier that time were the Democrats who decided to step up and call it out. They only call out political violence when it is done, or at least perceived to be done, by folks who do not support them, when their power is on the line. They have their power threatened. And now, of course, they're using what happened on January 6th after 4 years of telling us there's going to be a lot of violence, hoping in a weird way that violence would happen as a result of Donald Trump so they could be proven to be true. Now they're going to use it to continue this assault on some basic rights and some basic level of fairness in dealing with conservatives. This whole cancel culture nonsense is all of a sudden back being discussed in significant ways because people decided to exploit what happened on January 6th for their own political gain. It has nothing to do with condemning right-wing violence. It has everything to do with silencing conservatives, period.
Jason Rantz, I also think, too, that when we talk about this Antifa group and we talk about the violence and everything else, we were also told, really, that once Trump leaves, this all ends because he's created this kind of tension, you know, this humidity, if you will, this political humidity that it has to break at some point. And as long as he's there, the tensions are ratcheted up. And then once he leaves, it just goes back to their normal life. And, you know, we said that was BS back then, but they were actually blaming President Trump for the actions of this group. He's gone. They're still doing this, and they can't blame Trump for it anymore. So I guess I have to ask the question, is this in some ways now a message to the Democrat Party in Washington, to President Biden, hey, do what we want, give us the progressive socialist utopia you've promised, or else?
Well, very clearly, and again, because they got away with it for so long, and they still get away with it. Do you think anyone who was arrested, whether it was 9 in Portland or at least 2 here in Seattle, do you think anyone is going to suffer any legal consequences? Because I can tell you the names of people who have committed acts of violence way worse than what we saw last night that just get a free pass in both of these cities. There's no prosecution here. So every single time that you empower these people to do this kind of stuff, they end up doing it. We're talking about fringe radicals here, right? When you decide to use violence to forward an ideological agenda, I consider that. The definition considers it to be domestic terrorism. So what they're doing is they're holding these cities and the Democratic Party at some point hostage, saying, give us what we want or this unrest continues. And they're going to force either Joe Biden and the Democratic Party to start taking this seriously, or they're just going to cave and give in. And right now it seems like they're going to cave and give in, because have you heard much of a response from Democratic leaders in the violence last night? Because I haven't. In Seattle, every single council member put out no statement. One eventually did after I had to ask for one. And in the statement they give me from Andrew Lewis, who's a council member whose district was impacted, doesn't call out Antifa, gives like 2 sentences condemning the violence, and then immediately pivots to, well, we hope no one is going to use this as a means to dismiss the months of peaceful protest from the thousands who rallied against racism in this country. It is gaslighting at its worst, and the violence is only going to continue because, generally speaking, Democrats like to give in, and ignoring all of this means they're giving in.
Jason Rantz Show, KTTH 770 AM, Seattle, Tacoma. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Rich. I appreciate it.
And I think that, as Jason said, you know, what they think they're going to get what they want. I think he's right about that, too. I also think it's interesting how we're supposed to believe now that we can, you know, turn the page on everything that we've seen with regards to Democrats hating conservatives and back and forth. You know what you never hear, by the way? When you hear all these people talking about brainwashing people and people have been radicalized, you notice how they never say that about Antifa? Notice how, and I played you this clip earlier in the show, Ben Rhodes on MSNBC, you know, to say that Trump supporters have been radicalized over the last 4 years. They never talk about the left and the violence that happens on the left and how radical they are and the fact that they have been, in fact, radicalized. It doesn't come up. They all have grievances that are legitimate societal grievances. That's how they're viewed. There's legitimate societal grievances. And you have to understand that. And so whether it's them breaking, the COVID rules or it's them smashing windows, it's the same thing. These legitimate societal grievances. And you should understand that. And if you don't understand that, well, that's on you. And this is part of the problem of why I think the Democrats' unity message falls flat. Again, we think of it as BS. Is because when I have to listen to John Brennan, who in my opinion should be in prison for lying to Congress and obstructing Congress. By the way, if you want a good movie to watch, there's an Amazon movie called The Report. Amazon makes movies now, movies and shows and everything. And Amazon did a movie called The Report. It's all about the CIA's Enhanced Interrogation Torture Report and how the Senate committee led by Dianne Feinstein went to find out the truth, and they did the investigation. And I mean, literally to the point where he ordered people to break into the SCIF and steal Congress's information that they were gathering. A complete violation of the Constitution, the law, all of it. But he hates Trump, and he hated Trump, so then he was on MSNBC and CNN all the time. They love John Brennan. When I could listen to that guy comparing us, my side, to terrorists and fascists and bigots and extremists and everything else, and not a blip about the protesters, the violent insurrectionists. Protesters is a terrible word for it. It's violent insurrection in Portland and Seattle. Not a word about them. And again, that's why the unity message really falls flat. Because this stuff is going on, and it's been going on, and you don't hear a peep from the left about it. We condemn that. We condemn the Capitol Hill riots. We're consistent. They're not. Period. End of story. It is the Guy Benson Show with me, Rich Zeoli, in for Guy Benson, and we are coming right back.
You're listening to Guy Benson. From the Fox News Podcasts Network. Download and listen to Tyrus and Tim.
Ladies, this is why you must not laugh at men's jokes.
Yes,
And try and make them think if you're as a way of flirting, because then they will run around thinking they're funny.
Yep.
Like Cam is not funny at all. And I told him that. He's like, other girls laugh at my jokes. I'm like, that's because they were trying to sleep with you.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. Did you hear the news? Now you can. With instant updates from Fox News for Amazon Alexa, breaking stories and top headlines, daily coronavirus developments, the economy, and so much more. Brought to you by Fox News, America's #1 cable news network. Plus, setup couldn't be easier because everything's ready to go in the app. Just say,
Alexa, play news from Fox.
In Fox News.
It's the latest when you need it, on demand from Fox News and Amazon Alexa. Coronavirus crisis.
I'm in a New York state of mind.
No longer in a New York state of mind, people are moving out of the Empire State in droves. New York's population shrunk more than any other state between July 2019 and July 2020. More than 125,000 people left in that time period. Not far behind were Illinois and California, according to recently published Census Bureau data. This trend of Americans leaving high-tax states isn't new, but the pandemic sped it up. People are heading into states where the weather is warmer, the taxes are lower, and they can afford a bigger house with more space. Texas and Florida, both of which have no state income tax, saw the biggest growth. Arizona came in third. With work from home continuing into the new year, experts say it's likely people have moved will stay put and the trend will continue. In Chicago, Grady Trimble, Fox News.
Coronavirus crisis.
Next on House of Broken Dreams, you'll meet a woman who says she was harassed by a sexual predator while living at Mosaic.
And when I opened the door thinking a pest or even maybe a deer or something was on there, a raccoon is really what I expected to see. In the corner of my patio to the left, maybe 6 feet from me, is a man.
Available now on Apple Podcasts.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network, it's the Fox News Rundown. Start your day with a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. A daily morning podcast going far beyond the headlines, tapping into the massive reporting resources of Fox News to provide a full picture of the news of the day.
I'm Dana Perino.
I'm Brett Baer.
I'm Jessica Tarlov.
I'm Chris Wallace, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Listen and subscribe now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. from the historical audio archives of Fox News Talk.
Mahalia Jackson, who died in 1972, is widely regarded as the first queen of gospel music. Although she was a heralded and much-loved performer, she lived a double life in racially divided America.
When I'm on the stage and on television and working with white people, they just hug me and love me and say I'm so wonderful and I'm so great. And then when I'm walking down the street like an ordinary citizen, they don't recognize me. And when I go into the department store in the South, I can't get a sandwich, I can't get a bottle of pop, I got to stand, I can't even get a cab. And I'm just the Mahalia Jackson that they got through saying how wonderful I am. I don't understand this. What makes people act like that?
Stay tuned to hear more history as it unfolds before your ears. It's the audio archives of Fox News Talk.
Here on the Guy Benson Show, I thought it would be fun to dip into that a little bit, take a listen. They're discussing immigration, actually.
You know, why is it such a priority after the COVID bill, but you didn't even list it? So I wanted to kind of clarify that and get your thoughts on it.
Well, I wouldn't read into that other than immigration we consider as part of racial equity and part of which is a broad issue, but that's how the president has spoken about that crisis over the past several months, and clearly it is an enormous priority to him because we moved forward in announcing the specifics of an immigration bill, an immigration package he is eager to move forward on with Congress on his first day in office. But as you know, there's been a lot of history on efforts to do comprehensive immigration reform, to do any form of immigration reform. And what we're hopeful is that this will be a moment of reset and a moment to restart discussions on Capitol Hill. There are already a number of co-sponsors who have been announced to have those discussions. There are experts on immigration who have worked on this issue on both sides of the aisle. Historically, it is an issue that there is bipartisan support from the business community, supports from a range of outside groups with different political tilts, and we're hopeful that will help propel it forward.
Senator Menendez said today on a call, he called it a Herculean, effort to get this through. As you know, it hasn't gone through, as you just mentioned before. I mean, there are Republicans grumbling today that there's not more in that bill that they want to see. So is that bill, what do you think the prospect of that bill getting through is?
Well, I don't know that I can predict that the first day. I mean, it's only been out for 24 hours. But what was important to the president in the outline of this bill is that it is addressing a couple of areas that he doesn't feel have been effectively done in the past. The last 4 years, the immigration policy has been based around funding for a wall. That has not worked, even to keep the country safer, even to keep bad actors out. And so his approach is multi-pronged. It is to do smart security that will help address and use technology to address key border crossings, address ports of entry more effectively and efficiently, and putting that oversight in the hands of the Department of Homeland Security. It will also help address root causes of migration, and that hasn't been in past bills, as you probably well know, Anita. It was not in the bill in 2013, but it's something that he has been an advocate for in his time in public office. And it also has a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented immigrants who are living in the country. There are components of here in the bill that address a lot of the issues that have not been addressed in the past, and certainly the components of it that talk about smart security are the kind of border security that we think is essential and more effective than what we've seen over the past couple of years. Go ahead. Oh. Can I go to Zeke first and then to Kristen? Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on a question the President an hour or so ago about the 100 million vaccines in the first 100 days target. That's roughly a per diem basis of where the vaccinations are right now. Can you just elaborate a little bit why the President isn't setting the bar a little bit higher? Maybe require another nudge. Just to explain to the American people when they see these statistics of one tracker had 1.6 million yesterday. So why isn't the President shooting just a little bit higher given the magnitude of the crisis here?
Well, none of us are mathematicians, myself included, so I asked our team to do a little math on this. So the Trump administration was given 36 million doses when they were in office for 38 days. They administered a total of about 17 million shots. That's about less than 500,000 shots a day. What we are proposing is to double that to about 1 million shots per day. And we have outlined this goal and objective in coordination and consultation with our health and medical experts. So it is ambitious. It's something that we feel is bold and was called that certainly at the time. And we're working overtime to help to achieve it, try to achieve it.
But is the president trying to, he obviously would try to exceed that if possible. Is it possible we may see in a couple of weeks or a month that the president would...
Obviously, the question about the 100 doses, and we'll talk more about that in the 5 o'clock hour. Also, I think it's fascinating how clearly they've given up any pretenses of moderation here as they look at immigration as a racial equity issue. And border security, it's not really a thing. I mean, that's pretty obvious here. Border security is not a thing. What is a thing is racial equity, and what they view as racial equity is letting everybody in. That's racial equity for them. Immigration is a huge progressive issue, and it's obvious that on this, they are going all progressive. No doubt. Didn't take them long. None of us are surprised. The 5 o'clock hour of the Guy Benson Show. Happy hour. Straight ahead.
39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, addresses the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt that, on March 26, 1979, led to a negotiated peace between the two nations, the first between Israel and any of its Arab neighbors.
The countrysides of both lands are free from the litter and the carnage of a wasteful war. Mothers in Egypt and Israel are not weeping today for their children fallen in senseless battle. The dedication and determination of these two world statesmen have borne fruit. Peace has come to Israel and to Egypt.
Stay tuned to hear more history as it unfolds before your ears. It's the audio archives of Fox News Talk.
This is House Call for Health. Fear of tech addiction might be a bit overblown. This from a study at the University of Colorado Boulder, looking at technology use and the impact of parents putting restrictions on kids. Lead author Stephanie Malborn is a professor of sociology at the Institute of Behavioral Science. The school's News Digest, CU Boulder Today, quotes her as saying, "Are lots of people getting addicted to tech as teenagers and staying addicted as young adults?" The answer from our research is no. Malborn also saying that what we do as parents matters less than most of us believe it will. Co-author Joshua Good, a doctoral student in sociology, says many of those fears were anecdotal, but now that we have some data, they aren't bearing out. Nearly 1,200 young adults were surveyed, 56 of them undergoing extensive interviews. The data was collected before the pandemic began, but the authors say that should ease parents' minds over all that extra lockdown screen time. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News.
Very latest headlines, along with in-depth analysis and conversation, depend on Fox News Radio and FoxNewsPodcasts.com.
Promising a swift trial. I'm Joe Chiro, Fox News. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer today said he'll push for a quick impeachment trial of former President Trump.
We will move forward with the trial. It will be fair, but it will move at a relatively fast pace.
A growing number of Republicans think the trial's a waste of time, like South Dakota Senator Mike Rounds.
To begin with, I think it's a moot point, because I think right now Donald Trump is no longer the president. He is a former president.
Rounds on NBC's Meet the Press. The House delivers an article of impeachment to the Senate tomorrow evening, with the trial set to begin the second week of February. The Biden administration working this weekend to sell its $1.9 trillion COVID aid package to senators. It's also focusing on increasing COVID-19 vaccinations. White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain.
This country has never given 100 million shots in 100 days. So if we can do that, I think it would be quite an accomplishment.
But obviously, we're not going to stop there. I mean, 100 million people, 100 million shots is a bold, ambitious goal, but we need to keep going after that. So that is our goal. That is our first goal. It's not our final goal.
Klain on NBC's Meet the Press. 6 people, including a pregnant woman and her unborn child, were killed in a shooting in northeast Indianapolis overnight. Police Chief Randall Taylor.
What we saw this morning was a different kind of evil. What occurred this morning, based on the evidence that's been gathered so far, was a mass murder.
Police have not identified any suspects, but say the shooting does not appear to be random. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have won the NFC Championship, beating the Green Bay Packers 31-26. They'll face off in the Super Bowl against the winner of tonight's AFC title game between the Bills and the Chiefs. America is listening. Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network, download and listen to the Media Buzz Meter with Howard Kurtz.
Assange was charged with 17 counts of espionage and 1 of computer misuse over the WikiLeaks publication of those thousands of leaked military and diplomatic documents. Now, his lawyers say, oh, he's acting as a journalist. I'd like to see that testimony in court. I've never regarded Julian Assange as a journalist. I don't think he takes the precautions that journalists do. I think he just tries to do damage to America.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. America is listening to Fox News. Did you hear the news? Now you can. With instant updates from Fox News for Amazon Alexa, breaking stories and top headlines, daily coronavirus developments, the economy, and so much more. Brought to you by Fox News, America's #1 cable news network. Plus, setup couldn't be easier because everything's ready to go in the app. Just say,
Alexa, play news from Fox.
In Fox News.
It's the latest when you need it, on demand, from Fox News and Amazon Alexa.
A number of lawmakers and several governors continue to speak out against President Biden's decision to end the Keystone XL pipeline. Among them, Montana Republican Governor Greg Gianforte.
It would have created thousands of U.S. jobs, hundreds of jobs here in Montana, but probably the most important thing, the Keystone XL pipeline is a lifeline for rural Montana. Over $100 million in annual taxes to pay for teachers, to pay for law enforcement, to pay for infrastructure. We need this in rural Montana, and it's also the most economical and environmentally sensitive way to get crude oil to market. It's going to get there anyway, but now it's going to be on our roads and rail.
Gianforte on Fox and Friends Weekend. China imposed sanctions on more than 24 former Trump administration officials following the inauguration of President Biden. Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton believes those sanctions are dangerous and calls on top U.S. government officials to take a stand against China.
We cannot tolerate it. The Biden administration needs to denounce it forcefully. They need to impose reciprocal sanctions on Chinese officials. They need to find out if the Chinese ambassador was involved in it. And if so, they need to kick him out of the country. We cannot tolerate China trying to influence government officials at the highest levels of American government.
Cotton on Sunday Morning Futures. The U.S. officials sanctioned face travel bans and business-related restrictions. The Israeli government has approved a U.S. brokered diplomatic deal upgrading ties with Morocco, pending ratification by Parliament. Meanwhile, Israel says it's banning all international flights to and from the country for 1 week, beginning Monday night, in an effort to stop the spread of new variants of coronavirus. Also on Sunday, Israel expanded its rapid vaccination drive to include late teens. I'm Joe Chiu, Fox News.
This is Fox News Talk.
Headline Rewind.
1989, the Soviet Union leaves Afghanistan.
General Boris Gromov crossed the bridge over the Amu Darya River. This was the final act in the withdrawal of all Soviet armed forces and services from the Republic of Afghanistan.
The government has to show clearly it has abandoned the old Stalinist class struggle approach.
Banishment for life for Pete Rose from baseball is the sad end of a sorry episode.
I gambled on other sports other than baseball. I never gambled on baseball, but I think I'm being punished pretty severely.
So the Oakland A's take a I'll tell you what, we have an
Jim Baker, once one of this nation's most powerful televangelists, now faces a lifetime in prison.
300 East Berliners are climbing over the metal fence here towards the Berlin Wall.
News as it happened then, news as it happens now.
This is Fox News Talk.
President Biden takes office with a call for unity.
Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war.
The new administration begins undoing what the previous administration did.
On day one, they were able to stop construction on the border wall and the former president's travel ban from Muslim-majority countries. They rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization.
What needs to be done to beat the pandemic?
We are already very close to vaccinating 1 million Americans every single day. What we need to do really is to double that capacity.
And there's new management at the U.S. Senate.
The problem for the Democrats is that they have to temper expectations, and that's precisely the opposite thing of what they've been doing.
With Chad Pergram, I'm Jared Halpern from Washington.
And repeat after me. I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.